speaking of that, we are in a new space, and today we are at the location of our guest for this episode. Our guest is Phillip Lomax, Vice President of Media Science. I met him a few days back, and he sort of took me back 2, 3 decades. And as much as I love the guy, he actually made me feel redundant. So, good 1 week of learning, attending his trainings, and understanding what they have built. And what they've built is revolutionary, and many brands are using this. Phillip, welcome to the Grey Matter.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
Welcome, Phillip.
I'm grateful to be here.
And we were all sitting at the same avenue, 2 streets ahead, but we didn't know.
You know, that's really the tragedy, I think, of the modern age, which is we have, probably the greatest technology of all time. We have a lot of solutions at our fingertips. And still, because we're distracted among so many screens and so much clutter, and a fighting chance to try to find what we're looking for becomes harder and harder and harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I try to draw analogies between different situations or different things. And I would draw an analogy with attention. And attention is everywhere. You need attention on television, on digital, on radio, in person at an event that you're speaking. If you're a teacher, you're speaking, you want attention. And it's nearly impossible, or was nearly impossible, to gauge where the attention is coming from, what was real attention and what was not real attention. And I think media science is that tech that sort of tells you what real attention is and what real content matters.
Absolutely. I mean, at Media Science, we've been in business for the past 17 years, but our founder and CEO was an academic, right? So he comes from a background that requires using, language in very specific ways, right? So around like the construct of attention, right? We've done a lot of research around attention with Google and the Aaron Burke-Bass Institute of Marketing Science. And what we found is that attention is actually multidimensional, right? So just like what you just shared, right? We can be in many different places, and some people are, excited about us being there on a platform as compared to a different one. And when we really did the research and the hardcore science, what we found is that it's context that matters, right? So context starts with audience, it goes down to platform, content, and the format in which we show up within the marketplace.
Tell us more. We don't know anything, and the audience does not know anything. Of course, it's a specialized tech with very few people have used. Not a very few, but a lot of people have used, but it's again not mainstream. And the whole purpose of doing our part in getting the conversation out about media science to many people through our channel and through our own social and yours is to have more people understand what it is, because honestly, it's love at first sight. When I saw it last week, I said, a lot of people should know what it is, because it's a game changer in the literal sense of the word.
It really
guys
is.
Can see what's happening behind us. These are all tiny, tiny metrics which are actually purposefully creating something which is of value and which are giving relevant, what Khurram had said, data-backed decisions.
So I was almost about to say this, that let's take the guesswork out of decision making.
So this is what it's doing. This is the tagline. We have a habit of giving away free taglines to all our guests, right? So this takes the guesswork out of
guesswork.
Okay.
And you have to, the decisions have to be data based.
Right. So it takes the guesswork out of decisions.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So Phillip, but for a layman or a laywoman, tell us so first use case scenario, if it's a media agency, it's Group M.
Yeah.
What do they do?
So an agency would come to us because they sit in between platforms and brands, right? They have historically been the decision makers on behalf of their clientele, and they've been able to have a good grasp in terms of the evolving media landscape. So an agency would come to Media Science to try to quantify where they would like to buy media and how much media they would like to buy, in which particular context and culture as well, and within what formats. Right? So all of these components are connected with each other. And I think it's also critical to recognize that there may be assumptions in the marketplace that actually harm us in the long term. So as an example around addressability, right? In market category buyers actually perceive advertising in the same way that individuals who haven't provided us with signals that they are category buyers do as well. So what does that mean? It means that 95% of your audience is likely not in the market, but they're receiving advertising in the same way that the 5% who are in the market would be, right? So it means that we should actually target 100% of our total addressable market as often as we can with the right frequency, of course. And we should use various platforms and ad formats to keep our messaging consistent, but also fresh, right? The problem with, with advertising today, especially for the digital realm, which I know that you guys have a lot of experience in, is that we stopped innovating as much as we should.
Yeah.
Right?
It's all about reach and impressions
Exactly.
served.
Precisely. So
A number of likes.
Precisely. That's what engagement is. But what's real engagement?
Indeed. What real engagement is the ability to understand, one, if a human was actually there, so attendance. The second point is attention, right? Did we achieve some type of visual attention to, recognize the person is there? But what's most important in this equation is actually focus, right? So focus is measured with heart rate data and the ability to elicit response, right?
So
Which is measured
attendance?
with electrodermal activity.
Attendance.
Yeah.
And the second one is
Attention.
attention. And
Yeah.
then third is
Focus.
focus. And
Yeah.
so attendance, attention, focus.
And then we achieve impact.
And you achieve impact. And that also drives towards the second question, which is for the creative agency or
Yeah.
for the content agencies, that this data helps them define or design better content.
Absolutely. I mean, not only that, but we actually get you so much further through the creative process, right? So we've developed new generative AI tools to help us develop a concept, and then we take that concept and we put it into what we call our social media simulations, right? So platforms that look and feel just like Facebook or TikTok will insert that generative AI concept, and then we'll test it. And we won't tell people what we're testing, but we'll determine if we are able to stop the scroll. Because if we're unable to stop the scroll, then it means that
Victory.
we're definitely not going to have success outside.
Yeah.
And what are the core metrics like heart rate, sweat?
Yeah.
It has
So
a long
that's the
list, I know.
science. That's the science part,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
The
definitely.
tech part.
So I mean, there's a lot of metrics that we bring to the table that a lot of companies may have never had experience with before. I'll start with like the simplest metrics, and we'll work towards the more complex ones. So the first one comes down to the way that you design experiments, right? Right now, with a lot of brand lift studies, we're grabbing two sets of audiences, right? So usually something like 300 people who are actually going to see the ad and 300 people who will never see the ad. And we're asking the 300 people who will never see the ad, what do you think of this brand, right? They weren't exposed to anything. And then the other 300 people, we're showing them an ad and saying, what do you think of this brand? So that's like a whole industry around brand lift. And actually, we think that that's a fundamentally flawed way of determining the impact of actual advertising, because usually and oftentimes they're just showing an ad to participants within a controlled vacuum, right? Not within a simulated version of reality, right? In something like a fake Facebook simulation, right? So that's the first principle. The second principle is behavioral data, right? So what happens when they're scrolling within the simulation, right? Do they like anything? Do they interact with it, etc.? How long is your actual asset on the screen for? So we have all of this rich behavioral data, and then we survey them on memory, on other KPIs like purchase intent, brand and ad liking, right? Memory is surveyed at 3 levels: unaided recall, aided recall, and brand recognition, because that's how our brain encodes information, right? So encoding, storage, and retrieval. Are we able to encode the message? Are we able to store the message over the course of time? And can we retrieve what we heard, right? So those are some of the fundamental metrics. And then the scientific measures that we use, right? Just because you use scientific tools, it doesn't make it science. The experimental design really matters here because we're comparing these tools across conditions, right? So some of the tools that we use are visual attention, right? So that's infrared, medical grade eye tracking cameras that precisely tell us where a human is looking at on a screen and pinpoints exactly where the human is looking at. We also look at heart rate data. Heart rate data is an indication of cognitive processing. What we're looking at here is cardiac deceleration, or the slowing of the heart, which means that we're reallocating resources in our body to capture information. Right? We're looking at electrodermal activity, so sweat activity as well. This is an indication of response intensity. So how strong of a response was this? It could be a positive or a negative response. It doesn't matter in this scenario. All that matters is the level of response. So if we're trying to be funny, right, what level of response do we elicit? If we're trying to scare someone through horror, what level of response do we elicit? Same goes for music, same goes for social, same goes for film.
All
same goes for
emotions,
television.
basically.
Well, all emotions is a difficult thing to say, right? Because what we're doing for valence or emotion is facial expression analysis. And, based on our history and what we know about the limitations of the tools, we know that facial expression analysis is incredible for measuring joy, right? So smiling activity, laughter, etc. But our faces also tell us a lot of other different types of emotion as well. So, certainly this is a quantum leap, forward in terms of where the whole industry is, but, we're scientists, right? So we know what the limitations are.
And the real meaning will come out when you see everything from different contexts. So then the real meaning will come out, basically.
Exactly. And that's why you need a multi-tool approach for a multimodal decision-making process.
Right. So, the way I remember, there was a training done by P&G back in the day, and they told us that, the human eye sort of tracks any visual, be it static or dynamic, and it starts from the top left, and it goes down in a curve, and then it goes up to the right, and then it sort of evens out. Now, that's why you see a lot of ads, they have their logo on the top left, which is the most important thing that they want to see, right? And it works great in out-of-home and print and press advertising, and even digital to an effect. But now, having applied media science tools to our ad copy, to our content, does it also sort of train us or teach us where to position a product within a frame?
Well, absolutely, right? Like at the simplest form, but even going back to the logo question, right? Our researchers actually determined that it's better if the logo moves.
Okay.
Right? So across frames, even within the FIFA Club World Cup that I was watching yesterday, well, maybe you gentlemen saw it too.
I was chilling upstate.
It probably sounds like a great weekend.
I was planning the week.
But during the Club World Cup, on the billboards that you saw around the stadium, what they did there is they rotated the logos, right? So like you'd have a best practice that we deciphered at Media Science, which is if you're going to sponsor around a field of play, to get the maximum value out of the sponsorship, you should really give that field of play to one sponsor, right? So you don't share, this visual attention, right, and fixation across like a litany of several different sponsors. So we saw that best practice implemented yesterday, right? And within, the field of play, you've got a brand like Panini, right? There are several digital displays there, and then one of the Panini, logos, it would rotate, right? So there would be a slight bit of movement. And what we found is that's actually superior to of a viewer experience.
Considering the fact that all the others were static and only one was moving.
Well, no. One, we take over the entire field of play for one brand for a certain amount of time, right? So more like programmatic advertising. And then out of all of the Panini, one of them is actually rotating slightly, right? So that gains our visual attention.
Even
and
one
our
step
focus.
further.
Exactly, right? So it's good to understand like the architecture, that within like a still image as an example, right? It's better to understand architecture through moving pictures, right? Like a television
And this is
broadcast.
proven.
Oh, we've proven it.
Because back home at PSL, the central sponsors, they get to put their logo all around the field, and some have animation, some are just static appearances. But when it's the franchise's turn or the team's turn to give space to their sponsors, it's a circus. So there are 8 different logos appearing around the field. So yeah, I understand the focus is not there, but how do we counter that?
Well, the way that we counter it is through empirical experiments with media science. Right? So we'll have a condition in which it's the same condition as it is today, right? The 8 brand sponsors around, the field of play, and we'll compare that to an altered version, right? And that we've manipulated at media science.
And that's for
basically.
television advertising,
Precisely.
television viewing,
Well,
not in-ground viewing.
Well, it could be, television viewing for this case, because television has the widest reach, right? The most implication. The same type of experiment could be done via social media if we really wanted to.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, like the point of sponsorship, by the way, is actually a priming effect, right? So it's great that, brands sponsor like a major sporting event like this, but they get the most value for their dollars when they choose to advertise adjacent to the programming, right? So the sponsorship makes us aware as an audience that Panini was meant to be here, right? And then when we're served an ad for Panini, it makes sense that they're advertising to us because they're a sponsor,
Okay.
right? So the whole thing should be cohesive, right? We call it the viewer experience.
So you had mentioned that you've been advising, media science has been working with NHL and increased their recall value or conversion, so to speak, any of the metrics that you will better tell us in TV advertising and also in content advertising.
No, absolutely. Thank you. The ESPN.com reported that NHL had developed what they call digitally enhanced dashboards, right? So the same concept that we were just talking about regarding FIFA, but now applied to hockey, right? And media science is actually tasked to conduct research to make sure that we weren't disrupting the audience's experience or the viewer's experience. With this new innovation that NHL was integrating. So we ran multiple tests to understand the best possible conditions. And it's actually those conditions that I shared earlier. It's best if one advertiser, right, has control of the entire sponsorship board. So we don't distract them with a bunch of different brand logos, on the screen. And it's also great if there's a little bit of an animation for that brand logo too, or connected to like category entry points basically for that brand itself. So NHL, used this research to go to market, and they saw a 21% increase in sponsorship revenue year over year. So I think the moral of the story here is it's great to innovate. We need to, right? The audience is changing. We need to entertain them, but it's even better to innovate and then have scientific research to prove the impact of that innovation. And that will lead to growth.
So let's jump to mass media, television. When we were walking to grab coffee the other day, you mentioned that it's
We contrary to the popular opinion that the ad break should be 30 seconds or 60 seconds. You mentioned in one of the cases, one of the research, it should be 120 seconds. Why does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
Scientifically.
No, certainly. So in order to achieve this insight, what we did with our partners at Freewheel through the Viewer Experience Lab, which is a multi-year partnership with Freewheel, which is a Comcast company that serves the entire programmatic universe within premium connected television. What we did is we ran an experiment with multiple conditions, right? So within those conditions, we did test, things like 30 seconds of ad breaks, right? 60 seconds. I think there was 45 as well, all the way up to 3 minutes and even 5 minutes of ad breaks to try to understand these various thresholds. And what we found is that, we could serve ads for up to 2 minutes without actually harming the viewer's experience, right? After 2.5 minutes, right? So it's really up to 2.5 minutes that we can serve ads, and it doesn't disrupt the viewer's perception of the program either, or the platform. So, 2 minutes is the sweet spot, but we went even further, right? Because we actually looked at ad length within these breaks, right? And what we found is that when we mixed and matched different ad lengths, so I'm talking about 6-second ads, 15-second ads, 30s, 1 minute long ads, etc. What we found is that the user's perception of time had changed. So even when we serve them something like 1.5 minutes of advertising, and if all of the ads were different lengths, the audience actually perceived it to be longer than 2 minutes of advertising, with all ads being 30 seconds in length.
This was surprising for me.
So with this is good.
I mean, so not only is this good, that, the core fundamental here is that it's not that audiences don't like advertising. Audiences don't like bad advertising experiences. Right? They just rationalize their answer to us when they say, "Oh, I hate ads." They just hate bad ad, clutter and experiences. So, what this means is, limited interruption within the connected television environment, right? It's great and perceived as great when, we're serving less ads within viewers' experience. But what I'm trying to communicate is, listen, you could serve up to 2 minutes of ads. So if you're only serving 1 minute right now, you could double your inventory basically without harming the audience. And also you're leaving a lot of money on the table, right? If you don't, because, we only have so much time within the day. Right? Just make sure that we're doing right by the most important part of this puzzle, which is the audience.
As we were just talking, that context is so important.
Oh yeah.
So, what about this 2 minutes and 10 or 30 seconds break with equal ads of 30 seconds? How much the quality of that ad itself matters?
Certainly. No, absolutely. It's a great question, and it requires more study, honestly. Right? So, you see these differences across social media and television as an example, right? Within social media, from our work with formerly Effect TV, now Comcast Advertising, what we know is that audiences, although they're native to social and digital experiences, they still have a bit of issue with trust within those platforms. And if you think about it mechanically, anyone can advertise within those environments, right? From SMB to mid-market to enterprise, but also it gives room to a lot of, bad actors, so to speak. So when we tested this, with unknown brands across television, social, across 2 different experiences, what we found is that television is an incredible entry vehicle for brands, because there's a level of trust associated with it, right? There's a perception that not every brand gets to advertise on television, right? So when we saw unknown brands first through TV and then through social, we saw a significant increase in things like visual attention and purchase intent as compared to those brands just being displayed on social alone, right? So context always matters.
So TV is not dead.
No,
that's what we're saying.
TV is evolving, right? If anything. And television, there's actually a report that just came out recently that a large number of audience of users and audience members are actually watching more linear television than they were previously. So TV really does matter, because TV is like the life, like the connection between our current culture in many ways, right? And through known sources of information. Right. Obviously, there's still a grappling, nature here with legacy media, having a lot of different perceptions compared to platforms like, like digital platforms and social media, as an example.
And I think people trust it more because starting a TV, a lot of regulations, infrastructure, and anyone can start a digital channel and make a video and upload. So that's why
on a
the
platform.
Yeah.
It's really brand at the end of the day, right? So there's a lot of components that fit together, right, in a really lovely viewing experience. The brand, the brands that we know that provide us with broadcast and news, as an example, we know them, right? I actually use one of them to see if my browser is online every time, right? Because I know that they'll consistently be there for me. Whereas other brands that try to enter the space, it's a bit harder for us to gain like a critical mass of audience viewership and also prove that in the marketplace within digital environments, because anything digital can be hacked, right? So I think that although it's perceived as legacy, etc., and measurement is harder on linear, absolutely. There's a lot that has to do with the context of showing up adjacent to what I think as an audience we know intuitively is a premium viewer experience.
So, what's the history? How many customers served? How many users hit? Like, what's going on? And
What's
how
your
long?
data?
Yeah.
Oh man, so we've done I think over at least 1,000 studies now, which is a lot. Probably the most
In 7 years.
in 17 years.
In 17
years.
years.
Yeah. And that probably doesn't include all the work that we did with Disney. But what this means is literally probably over 100,000 audience members measured over the course of time, maybe a lot more than that. And we work with the biggest media companies in the world, right? So like Disney was, our partner to found the company. We work with Disney, ABC, and ESPN for our first 5 years exclusively. And everybody wanted to work with media science, just waiting for us to end that exclusivity. And today we work with companies like Google, TikTok, LinkedIn, connected television. Within CTV alone, we partner with 8 out of the 10 leading streaming services. So these are the biggest streaming services in the world.
Wow.
And then, pretty much every major social media company has worked with us at one point or another. And then what I'm really excited about is new verticals. So like gaming. I wrote a white paper on video game advertising with the IAB. And what I found is that gaming doesn't achieve its fair share in terms of ad revenue. Because gaming now as an industry is larger than Hollywood and the music industry combined, which I was shocked by when I first learned. So I just did a partnership with Roblox, right? Which is a pretty, well-known gaming company and an incredible economy in its own right. And what we found that actually Roblox and this immersive gaming experience is superior, when we go head to head against television or even social media, right? And when they're combined together, the whole equation is just lifted, right? So we need to think about including these, platforms that are obviously consuming audiences, and we need to understand how they work together, right? And that's why media science is here.
And is media science fighting with anyone for the share of research that they get to do?
Yeah.
Are there any others like media science out there that we should be careful?
I think that, in my perspective, we do have a lot of competition from legacy research firms, right?
Yeah.
We try to partner with them as well to enable their clients to access these advanced methods and tools. But there's also greater competition around the use of time and budgets, right? So if you're a researcher that's never done this type of work before, it might seem like unreachable or difficult subject matter to grasp. And what our team has really excelled at is bringing in individuals who may have never experienced media science before, but making sure that they have an incredible, relationship with us and educate their teams and up-level everyone across the organization. My favorite part of my job is that I bring together on my client side research, sales, marketing, communications, and I see them all working together to bring our studies to life on the biggest stages in our industry. So Cannes Lions, ANA, etc. So that's really a fun part of my role here.
So, my favorite question, technology.
Yeah.
What's happening in technology? How much time did it take, and what kind of stuff is involved in this? Because so many metrics on health, your blood pressure, your heart rate, sweat, and a lot of analytics and stuff. So tell us everything about technology.
Yeah, I mean, when our clients work with media science, it's not like they're working just with one individual, right? We mobilize an entire team that we've developed over a decade, really, that plays specific verticalized roles within the research, right? So it starts out with creating a partnership, right? Understanding where we've been before, in terms of this particular subject matter, leaning on our legacy library, right? So we have a library of insights that's probably one of the most, advanced libraries in the world in terms of its depth and scope.
Wow.
And then we cultivate, particular initiatives and longer term initiatives with our clientele that focus on like a subject matter that we know that we can tackle together. And then we go out into development of the experimental design. So we have a full team of engineers that actually creates these simulations of social media. And then we have a team of research assistants that checks the simulations to make sure that we're displaying programming and advertising in the way that we want. Then we go into data collection. So we have a recruitment team that recruits individuals to either participate from the comfort of their own homes on their own devices, or to come into our laboratories where we're going to collect, data during a 30 or an hour or 2-hour session. Once we have that data, we need to comb through the data with a fine-tooth comb and understand what data is valuable and what's not, right? We need to probably oversample, sometimes to get rid of bad
You
data.
can see that oversampling being done right behind your head.
Exactly. And then it goes into an analysis through our head scientist. So he analyzes the data and then provides us with the final analysis, which we then deliver in a report to our clientele. Right, so it's a highly verticalized process that is really intricate across every stage, and we've gained a lot of efficiencies over time. We've actually, we do massive scale quantitative studies that no other company could do.
So how much of it is like completely automated? And what are the kind of technology, if you can name some like coding languages or tools were used to develop this?
Yeah, well, we've been developing internally generative AI tools, and we've also been building AI for the past decade, focused on data collection, really, right? So, our perception of this new age of AI, one, we believe that we can use AI to make our processes faster, right? We still believe that humans need to be at the center of what we do at Media Science. But we're also using generative AI to create new tools, right? Like generative AI concept development, right? In which you can literally just provide a prompt today and, give your brand assets to our system, and it will create a 30-second ad.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
which would work as per the parameters that are used in sort of the parameters that define that this piece of content is engaged, right? So you are
Exactly.
sort of give a pre-testing before you go for a shoot.
Precisely.
So that's the creative aid that media science brings to us, right?
Indeed. And the structure of, we believe in some ways that prompts in the future will be some of the most valuable, some of the most valuable parts of companies, right? So the insights that we've derived, we can include them within, that native prompt system that we have.
So it always goes through that filter before it reaches the system to analyze and generate something.
We call it contextual engineering.
Contextual engineering.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
And
At
so-
That's a
at the
course
ad level.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all of this is integrated in one tool, or you use multiple tools to do this stuff, and eventually the thing goes to the head scientist. So it's all integrated like in ERP, or like how broken it is?
It's a great question. So we're talking about kind of like two different, multiple sides of the business, right? So within the data collection, side, our engineers are creating, these analysis tools, basically. It's more so like determining which data is good and which data is bad in some ways, right? But on the generative AI side of our team, so we have Gen AI engineers and we have, traditional engineers.
Got it.
Right. So on the Gen AI engineers side, we're taking some of the insight and knowledge that we've gleaned and gathered, and we're using that to generate ad concepts, basically. And then we're taking the ad concept and we're putting them in our social media simulations, right? And we're going head to head,
Okay.
right? And we believe that that's going to alleviate a lot of economic loss within the North American market, because we're going to be serving audiences with ads that are really attractive, and we've already taken a lot of the guesswork out of that.
All right. So, this is all great, and I'm sort of comparing multiple markets where the Blue Dot operates, where I operate in general for work. Tell me, what was the resistance that media science felt from the conventional research or the conventional parameters that were for planning an effective content or effective media campaign?
Well, I don't really think that the clients that work with us consistently, I don't think we face resistance, right? Like the hardest part for us is to get into the door of an organization that maybe has never experienced this before. Organizations that don't spend that much money on research, or have never thought that in order to level up you actually needed to use science.
Yeah,
right.
And not what you feel like.
Exactly. I mean, there is this question within creative, especially around intuition, right? And like, I agree, actually, right? Usually the work that we do is empirical evidence that your intuition was right, right?
Yeah.
But
it's validation of intuition.
Indeed. And let's quantify just how right you were, right? And if you weren't right, you learned. Right? Like too much of the industry, I mean, this goes back to your
So there's no reason
question.
to throw any tantrum, right?
I don't think so. I mean, there's a reason to use this, because, even if we took an assumption that you had and gave you clarity, right? Then you could use still your decades of knowledge, right, with that new clarity to make even more informed decisions.
Yeah.
Right? Because
it's a win, right?
You want to use science, right? In science, if we find that something is working, it should be replicable, right?
Right.
So therefore, if we know, on the edges that we know that something works but it doesn't work all the time, let's just decode why it doesn't work all the time, right? And we can use science to decode that.
So tell us about more of your background personally. So since when you are in this company, and what you have been doing before this, so we'll be interested to know.
Yeah, so I've been with media science, I can't believe it, 5.5 years now.
Yeah.
Right? So
You don't believe it? Really? That short a time?
I know. I mean, it's a pretty significant portion of my life now. I didn't know that I would enjoy it as much as I have, and I didn't know that I would wake up every morning and just be really, really fascinated with the subject matter that we're studying, but also the clients that we get to work with. That's one of the best benefits for me, right? To be able to say that I collaborate with like the biggest media companies. But my personal background prior was I was at Uber Technologies, focused on Uber Eats.
Okay, wow.
Right? So I joined Uber Eats in 2016, basically the week that we transitioned from an instant delivery model to a marketplace. Right?
Okay.
So I was with the company for 3.5 years, which in Tech Week, as you know, is a long time, to be with a product that goes from nothing to where we see
The
it today.
journey is like, it's amazing. The number of users you increase in this time for these kind of products, that's insane.
Totally. So I work with literally thousands of restaurant partners, starting from SMB to mid-market to enterprise, right? So these are like the largest chains in the world, like Papa John's and Subway and so many more. And I help bring them into the Uber Eats ecosystem, the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And what I realized in that experience is that Uber Eats is far more than just a digital container for restaurant advertisements. It's a whole branded experience that's immersive, that allows us to be seamless in our transit, seamless in our lifestyle in terms of what we eat, when, how much, etc. But it also was a great level setting opportunity for the entire digital restaurant economy, because the size of an advertisement on Uber Eats is the same size for a small restaurant as it is for McDonald's. So I got to thinking about, well, what goes into the container, right? It's advertising. What are the components of advertising that actually drive transactions? Right? How do we use the marketplace in different ways to increase transactions, right? How, as my, all of my small business owner clients, how can they compete against a company that's as large as McDonald's, as an example? And this kind of set me on a journey to discover what was available in the marketplace. And I discovered media science, right? Media science could and is, right, like this way to shorten this distance very quickly.
It's a lot of answers to your questions in Uber Eats in your previous career, basically.
Exactly. Right. And then now, beyond Uber Eats, which is an incredible advertising platform that's just getting started in my perspective, now let's apply it to platforms like TikTok, platforms like LinkedIn, platforms like, television, right? And even at the genre, sports, news, right? Comedy, etc.
So Uber Eats was your first job?
No, I was in hospitality before that, right?
Wow,
so
very diverse.
I worked my way up to become a front office manager at a Marriott property in Seattle.
Okay,
And
wow.
that role actually was really important as well, because I learned how to talk to thousands of people every week, right? And listen,
shows.
And
listen
politely.
to them.
Politely.
Yeah, of course. The Marriott, and also educated me on systems, right, for franchises. So like the Marriott system is a highly replicable system that scales well globally with certain standards,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. We have a Marriott back home.
I'm sure.
Two actually. Yeah. So going towards closing, we spoke about resistance. We spoke about this new technology, and soon you will be in Pakistan. Hopefully, around the same time this episode goes online. What is that one thing that brands, agencies, be it media or creative or digital, think, or what they should sort of assess why they should be partnering with media science?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they should, right? I think the number one most critical reason is we drive revenue for our clients, right? And we save you a lot of money along the way too, right? So, the principles that we know already, even if we're just consulting with our clients, right? The principles that we know is that within advertising, your brand should be early and it should be often, right? Because the purpose of advertising is making people aware of what's available. They don't know what they want until they know what they can have. They don't know what they can have until they know what's available. But how can they know that you're available if your brand doesn't show up within the first 3 seconds of an ad, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And then we also need to focus on the distinct assets that make up your brand story, right? So you can't compete on a color being your primary, a primary brand asset, right? It's this shade of blue as compared to my competitors.
Yeah, this is my shade of green, and I'm not going to move ahead with the campaign if it's not that specific green, because that defines. So the woman should be dressed in green, the ball that they're playing with should be green, the wall has to be green, the cup she's holding has to be green. Everything revolves around color, and also make the logo bigger.
There are far more creative ways to tell our story, I'm sure.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Like, what are the actual category entry points for your brand, right? Are you actually using category entry points that your competitors would steal mental share because you use them? So you could, in fact, be advertising on behalf of your competitors by reminding audiences that that's actually what they stand for instead of what you stand for.
Yeah.
Right? So
you got to create some valid and some solid differentiators for yourself, which in your opinion should not be just colors.
Definitely not just colors. And, for the ones who have already won that game, because this is definitely a competition, right? Advertising is a game of leadership.
Right.
For the ones who have established particular colors or particular, distinct assets, we should find our own, right? We know certainly what the Louis Vuitton logo looks like.
Yeah.
Right. We know certainly without seeing the full, beautiful golden arches of McDonald's, what a McDonald's advertisement looks like, even if it doesn't tell us it's McDonald's, right? How do you get there for your brand? I think that we've gotten a lot.
It's a mix of multiple ingredients.
Precisely. It's a mix always, right? You're not just going to eat one part of the recipe. You're going to bake them all together to create something to deliver, right? We should be, it's kind of funny that you use, that type of example, right? Because I guess it's...
True story.
Yeah.
Bro.
You have the ingredients, right? Let's make sure that you're measuring appropriately.
Yeah.
Right?
That's where
And-
media science comes in.
Of course. And the greatest chefs, of course, the greatest chefs, you know, like they do it by eye, which is great. We're always going to need them.
But they've experimented, they've researched
Exactly.
before they've perfected.
Yeah. They just make it look like they're doing it by eye.
Yeah, so before perfecting, you have to do multiple iteration and research and practice.
Yeah.
As the old saying goes, practice makes a man perfect. And that draws me to my last question. What is the gray matter to you?
Well, the gray matter has multiple shades, right?
Okay.
And these become colors depending on how we see the world, right? So, as an example, species that see in infrared, as an example, right? Even within, like, you know, fiction, these look like colors, actually, right? So, I think the gray matter for me is like the coming together of all these different shades and colors, right? It looks beautiful together. I just want to understand, you know, the components of it coming together as well, right? Like, I feel like what we're doing at Media Science is actually taking a look at like this very beautiful, you know, experience that we're all enjoying together, and we're recognizing just how beautiful it is by quantifying it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of my enjoyment of it. And it's not just the gray matter that matters either. It's the energy that flows through it.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Poetic. Love it. Thank
Awesome.
you so much, Philip,
Yeah.
for being on the Gray Matter.
Thank you, gentlemen, for hosting.
And thank you for opening this room for us.